we're not going to, on a monthly basis, have you access to so much that you could get high. I mean, if you took a whole month's dose one day, maybe it would be enough to have the psychoactive effects.
Welcome back to our two-part interview with Senator Steve Dickerson of Nashville, the sponsor of this year's medical marijuana bill, which he expects to have a vote on in the Senate this year, the first time since he's been the bill's sponsor for 5 years. Where do these dispensaries come from?
Good question.
They are going to be separate from your pharmacy chains and from Kroger and Publix and Walmart and all of that. This is going to be brand new business.
Correct. So I'm pulling back the curtain for you. This is evolving as we speak. So as the two bills have gotten closer and closer together, one of the issues that we're still working through is the issue of licensure, and the issue of how many licenses might be available, and then how those licenses will in fact be put into effect, if you will. And so what we anticipate now is having licenses that will allow you to grow, and then licenses that will allow you to process, take the leaf and then turn it into the oil. And we don't have any smokable, there will be no leaf as part of this bill.
But there will be vapor.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too technical, but I believe the answer is yes to that. But I do want to make sure that what I think is vapor, I don't know.
But you will license separately those who grow it, right, and those who process it, and those who dispense it.
Then to get to your point, the dispensary, and so we will have specific cannabis dispensaries.
Will the same group or company be able to get all three licenses and be the whole chain?
Yes, we anticipate vertical integration being an option. And then we might actually, just for the very first initial onset of this bill, or outset of the bill, have one license that allows you to do all three, just to get people into the market. Because one of the things we've seen in other states is they set up such a regulatory burden that if you think about what our goal is, and that is to get what we think is a good medicine in the hands of patients in a cost-effective manner, if you set up so many regulatory hurdles that it adds time and time and time, and then money and money and money, then we could be sitting here 5 years from now with our first dispensary coming online with $1,000 a month cost, and that's the last thing we want. So we're trying to figure out a streamlined manner to get people into the marketplace within 12 months after the bill gets going, maybe 18 months.
And would all forms of medical payments be available for this? Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera, et cetera?
At this point, we don't anticipate this being anything but probably cash business. And I say this, that's not really part of my public policy kind of role with this. My goal is to get it available, and then if insurance companies, and they are in some states starting to consider covering it, if insurance companies come to a place where they feel like that it should be a covered expense, that's great.
But you don't envision Medicaid and Medicare
not at this
covering
time, no.
it.
No,
that would require a federal decision.
I believe so. I believe so.
All right. What safeguards will there be in the bill that prevent people from going to the doctor, complaining about one of those ailments, just in order to get it, to smoke it for recreational purposes? What safeguards prevent people from getting it legitimately, only to give it or sell it to somebody else? Other states have experienced at least some level of fraud in their medical marijuana programs. What safeguards does this bill have to prevent some of that?
All great questions. So you asked about three questions there, so I'll start answering them. If I forget one, remind me what the other ones. So as far as safeguards go, patients faking a diagnosis. So what we spell out in the bill is that you have an established doctor-patient relationship. And so part of this, we're actually putting on our trust of the physician, and I do have great trust in my medical colleagues that they would not, take a patient they never met before, who comes and said, "Yep, you've got Crohn's disease," without any data, any lab testing, any biopsies to prove that. And so part of it is relying on the established doctor-patient relationship. And I don't think physicians are going to go and just engage in willful.
Most physicians, but there's
so,
always the
okay, which is another question which you didn't actually ask, and that is, how do we identify physicians who might be doing that?
Yeah.
And so we're building in sort of what I'd call a guardrail in this bill. Every 6 months or 12 months, we haven't decided the time frame yet, the top 10, not prescribing, but the top 10 participating physicians, because this is not a prescription, but the physicians that recommend the most frequent recommenders, if you will, if you follow, are going to be reviewed by the commission. And if they find their behavior to be at all aberrant, will be allowed to take corrective action.
I would suggest you have them reviewed by the IRS, but that's
that's an entirely different subject. And so then the third question is, how do you prevent doctor shopping? That is, a patient go from place to place to place. So you have a cannabis card, and that cannabis card will be what tracks it, and so it will. You take the card. My number is 1, 2, 3, 4.
So many times before you have to go back and see your doctor.
And so the technological underpinnings of that are beyond me, but there is a way to track that card to make sure you're not going to 2 or 3 or 4 different cannabis shops with that card. And then the other point that you raised was diversion. And so I would tell you, part of the reason why this bill makes so much sense to me is the practical aspect of it, and that is cannabis is everywhere. You literally could go where we sit in my office now. You could go 100 yards from here and probably find somebody who would sell you marijuana. I don't doubt that for a second. And it's probably very cheap because the free market works really well. And there are people that are trying to undercut their competitor, and you can go from one street corner to another or call somebody, whatever it is, however.
Do you envision the legal medical marijuana being more expensive than the street value?
So that's the point. So I expect it will be more expensive. And so if really you just wanted to go get high, you could go do it much more cheaply. Number two, we're not going to, on a monthly basis, have you access just so much that you could get high. I mean, if you took a whole month's dose one day, maybe it would be enough to have the psychoactive effects. But we're not going to. We have parameters in terms of the dosage available, and so I just think practically anybody that wants to misuse it or use it for sort of illegal or recreational purposes, there are a lot of other alternatives that are cheaper and easier for them. What we're going for is the sick patients who we don't want to criminalize. We want to give them a chance to participate in a medical framework. We want to bring them out of the shadows and bring them into the healthcare, sort of light of day.
And as I understand it, I think it was the Times Free Press that reported that it would be legal in non-smokable forms, including those you ingest or vaporize. And when people think of vaporizing, they think of vape pens, which are the same thing as smoking, except it's vapor instead of smoke.
And so the technical,
why one and not the other?
So that's a good question. So I'm still working through that in terms of the definitions, and that's part of what we're going to work out. So I can't give you a great answer about that yet.
Okay. And finally, just for fun, why did you name it the Trump Act?
So the fact of the matter is, if you go to an urban area, Nashville is the one I represent, every elected official in the General Assembly supports this bill. They're 100%. Anybody that's in Davidson County supports it. If you go to Shelby County, almost all of them support it. If you go to Knox County, and so it tends to sort of, the urban legislators tend to support it. But as you get more rural, the support starts to weaken a little bit. If you look at the polling, in fact, it polls even in those rural districts 70, 80, 90% favorably.
In other words, the strongest resistance is coming from those who are most likely to support President Trump.
Exactly.
So this is, shall we say gimmick? Can we say gimmick?
I don't think that's an inaccurate statement. I wouldn't have called it that, but I would call it creative branding.
All right. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to speak about?
No, I'll just say this: I'm more optimistic than I've ever been. And our bill's starting to get traction, and I think we're going to put it up for its first vote in about 10 days. And over the last 4 years, I've not put it up for a vote ever. There's not been a vote cast in the Senate on medical cannabis.
Because the support just wasn't there.
I knew it was going to lose. And
now, as I understand, Speaker McNally does not support it, or neither the Speaker nor the Speaker pro tem. The two top Senate leaders do not support it.
The Speaker pro tem is a pharmacist, and so he's one of the people I'm working closely with. So I don't want to speak out of school, but I think let me just say this. Sorry.
Well,
if you want to edit out.
Before you say that, let me ask you something that might lead you to what you Are pharmacists in general opposed to it? And if so, is it perhaps because it's considered a form of competition to existing pharmacies.
I would actually tell you the Pharmacists Association is supportive of the bill and has helped us write some of the language.
Okay.
Because pharmacists do play a prominent role in this. And so I, in fact, would tell you that the pharmacists across the state probably, in general, would embrace this.
Senator Dickerson, thank you for joining us on Policy, Not Politics.
Okay.